Well, it is with great pleasure that I bring the rabble rouser of the Tesla community on tonight. Alexandra, it is great to have you on board. Boomer Mama.
You know that that's actually fake. I'm not really a boomer, but I'm quite clever. So I thought, first of all, I don't like Gen X. I think that's just doesn't sound right, right?
Doesn't right.
And I think boomer is cuter. And then since I'm a little bit younger than I would be a boomer, it's cheating with the hope that people think, oh, she's a nice young looking boomer. And
Yeah, there you go. You look really
trying to
good.
be.
You look really good for your age if you happen to actually be that age.
Well, I'm actually only 2 years off, so
Two
it's
years
not
off.
as if I'm cheating a lot, but I'm 2 years off. I'm 58 now, so
I got it.
it's coming
Yep.
all together.
Well, maybe we can get the people that make up those generations to change the year. That would be another way to do it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, what I wanted to start, what we're going to do, just so everybody knows, eventually we are going to get into a little bit about who you are and a little bit about what that accent, where that accent comes from and things like that. And I think people are going to be a little surprised. Maybe not. Yeah, some will. But what I want to start with before we do that, Alexandra, is I really want to get into current events. And when I say current events, I mean the last 2 weeks. Talk to me about what you've been thinking about. I mean, all of us have our opinions and thoughts about what's been going on these last 2 weeks, but what do you have to say about the last 2 weeks?
Um, uh, we had this interview. I think you commented on it, and I think you actually did a show on it with Dan Ives. And I was really eager to have that interview because he has very good insights into what institutionals think, right? We have that insight when we read Morgan Stanley's research. They always comment on, what's coming back from the institutional base, and with Dan as well. And I would say the two main findings that I took out of that interview with Dan Ives were when he answered my question, are institutionals back? He said, well, they may have been underweight to their benchmarks or whatever else they're using prior to the shareholder meeting. And then once the shareholder meeting came out to our liking, it obviously takes them a couple of days and weeks. Institutionals are not day traders the way we imagine that. It takes them a couple of days and weeks to implement that. And so that was the first wave of more positive news moving towards the benchmark. So they're not overweight yet, don't get me wrong. And at the same time, we know we have hedge funds that are still shortening Tesla. So there are two different dynamics happening at the same time. So the first one was this post-shareholder meeting relief. And then the second was obviously the relatively good production and delivery numbers, but also that spike in the energy deployment. Now, we know for energy deployment doesn't mean finances yet, right? We all know that can have a couple of quarters of delays, but it obviously suddenly spiked the interest of institutionals, and Dan confirmed to us that he had, in all the years, maybe 10, 12 calls on Tesla Energy. And the last week, he had in 1 week 12 calls.
Right.
So that really, I think that gave it the second wave. And then today we had that research piece from Jonas on energy, where he confirmed again, their high belief into energy. They actually think it's gonna very soon catch up margin profitability of in numbers, not in percentage. In percentage, it's higher already than of the car segment in Tesla. And so lots of people that are so stuck on Tesla as a car company are slowly moving. I mean, there's no surprise there. We all knew that energy was coming, right? None of us, but you just have to. I mean, I give them a little bit of credit. They have to look after 50 or 100 names, right? Tesla is only one of them. Elon is probably not their favorite CEO because he's just not so corporate America. So I understand why it takes. But we had a very particularly favorable setup because the stock price was in April 160. I think we had 140 a couple of weeks prior to that. So we were so undervalued compared to the other Max 6, Max 7, and we had so much to catch up that just, 2 normal events, because the shareholder vote should have gone through. We knew we were working for it, and energy will become an ever-growing part of Tesla's business. So anybody really into Tesla wasn't going to be surprised by that. But obviously, for institutionals, that gave them some realistic path, that gave them numbers to put into their spreadsheet, that
Right.
gave them suddenly the feeling that, okay, this is undervalued, we have to get at least back to benchmark. So I do believe they're just about getting back to benchmark. I don't think they're overweight Tesla yet. I think they're with a long way to go before they overweight Tesla. We should be way over 300 until we get into a zone where they don't feel comfortable about it.
Got it. Got it. So, I tell this story often, and probably there's a few people on my show that have heard me tell it. Back in my 20s, and I'm the other end of the baby boom. I actually qualify, but I'm 3 years short of being the oldest part of the baby boom. But as I got into my 20s and the baby boom was over, and it was obviously over, and we'd had a few years in a row of 1 million per year less babies being born, a million per year, down from 4 million to 3 million. I took a look around. My mother was in the education system, and I took a look around and I said, the grade schools are going to have to start closing in 5 years. 7 years, whatever. In other words, the kindergartens and the first grade, eventually they'll be closing grade schools. Nobody paid any attention to that until the kids were in the fourth grade, until the baby bust hit the fourth grade. And it's like, I think that's how I look at Wall Street. It's like, you have the information, you've got the demographics, you've got
exactly.
So
but until they put the nose into it, I agree.
So now we're looking at all of these things that they could be looking at. We're looking at, they just figured out energy, maybe, at least some. You've got the Generation 2.5 vehicle. You've got the Juniper refresh. You've got 8.8 coming up. You've got the semi-truck facility starting to actually build, and you've got Optimus. Other than that, there's nothing that they might want to pay attention to in terms of getting out ahead of it.
I mean, Dan told us they're not paying attention to Optimus at all.
Right.
And for the robotaxi, his biggest hope was that they would announce a fleet partner.
Right.
I don't expect a fleet partner at all. I mean, maybe there's a fleet partner, but that's not going to be, for me, the new thing. For me, it's going to be an app. It's going to be a network we can all get into. It's going to be a business model. There's going to be so much more. Not a fleet partner, but I guess if they now suddenly hear Hertz or whoever else is part of it, then that helps Wall Street.
Right. Of course, if there was a license, that would be maybe the equivalent in terms of their excitement. So yeah, those kinds of things, again, where they can put pencil and paper to it immediately. That's the kind of thing that they're hoping for. So just very quickly, what are you hoping for as a bare minimum on 8.8? Maybe you just said, but physical vehicle, what else?
I think we'll see a car. I think we'll see a two-seater that is, no steering wheels, no pedals. That is a comfortable zone where people want to sit and work while they are transported to their work or wherever they want to go. I think we'll also maybe see a lineup of future PowerPoint, not in physical form, a lineup of future use cases, vans or whatever else of robotaxis. So the CyberCab for me is that two-seater that we saw modeled by France. You probably remember the shape and all that. So I think we'll see the two-seater. I think we'll see a PowerPoint on other versions of that. We may have news on what's happening in China, whether they got the license for Shanghai, whether they're starting there, whether they have partners there, other than Baidu, I mean, which would be obviously crazy good news, because that's where 60% of EVs are sold in the world, right? So the people always think it's all in the US. Well, it's not. It's by far not. And I do believe we should see, I said this earlier, the app, the way that the current Tesla owner who wants to participate can get integrated. What is the business case for it? How much of miles driven revenues come to the owner and how much to Tesla? and that will give them some food, because that is, that's something they can put into their Excel spreadsheet. So there they can then suddenly, get that. We may get news on the take rates. I'm not very keen on the take rates now. I just think, as long as there are still iterations of improvement for FSD, as I mean, the NAG is obviously the NAG being gone is a great improvement, but I'm not really keen that on 8.8 there is already this final version of FSD now suddenly in all 6 million Teslas. But a timeline, what is going to happen, when can they integrate, what are first cities or states where it's going to work, both in China and in the US. I think Europe is going to be a bit later, Canada maybe as well. So the business case for it, the business case for Tesla, for business owner, for Tesla owners, and I hope that we get some food on that.
Okay. All right. So now you're most famous. I mean,
I'm not famous.
Well, you're kind of famous. We're all kind of famous. All of us in the Tesla sphere, at least famous in our own minds. So what is the current status of the thing that has made you famous, the case in Delaware? What's going on? Where are we today?
I could honestly, I would prefer being less famous and not have that case in Delaware, but let's do it. So let me put the situation where we are. Your listeners probably know, but just put it that we had that preliminary judgment end of January. Then in February, we did that in 4 days collection of shareholders who wanted with us, with Amy and me, mission the board to now take action. Meaning we interpreted that preliminary judgment to the point that the compensation package from Elon was rescinded, and we wanted the board to reinstate it. So we asked to fill out a survey. Amy and me thought we hopefully had about 100 co-signers when we would send that off, and we wanted it to go quickly. So we gave ourselves 4 days from a Saturday to a Tuesday. So there was a weekend included, which obviously has much less activity on X than days where the stock exchange is open. So we did that in 4 days, and we got nearly 6,000 signers. I mean, this was just mind-boggling. And then I'm used to using surveys in my day job, so we did that on SurveyMonkey, and SurveyMonkey is very good in extracting this and letting you do tables and all that. So I was very quickly able to put this in a presentable form, and we had lots of confidential information. I mean, people gave us the number of shares they were holding, where they were holding them, their names, their addresses. So these people trusted us a lot with the data, and I really want to thank them. So that was February, and we sent that to the board of directors of Tesla, missioning them with 2 things. One, do anything you need now to reinstate that compensation package. That is our order as shareholders to you, board of directors. And the second, which obviously followed up on Elon's posts about moving out of Delaware, we didn't want to go all the way already saying you have to go to Texas, but we said, please look for ways of how to leave Delaware the soonest possible to the best state that can accommodate us. So these 2 points were sent on that famous Tuesday in February to Tesla's board. And I think that was actually crucial, because that gave Tesla the order. They also got some individual letters from other shareholders, but obviously this was huge because it was nearly 6,000 shareholders. It was more than 29 million shares, if I remember right. And I had to take out some Tesla Q stuff who thought they were funny participating with 42 million, whatever. So anyway, so after cleaning it out, it was close to 30 million shares. So we sent that off, and that coincided with Tesla then thinking how they could do that. And they put then in place what is called a special committee in March. So they waited for our order and then created that special committee, which was headed by Catherine Winston-Thompson, one of the board members. Adorable lady. I mean, I met her at the shareholder meeting. So much respect for her. And she hired lawyers to help her in this task that the shareholders asked her to do. So that special committee was put in place. And I was during March all the time tweeting, where do we get the proxy statement for the May shareholder meeting? Because remember, in 2023, we had a shareholder meeting middle of May. And so normally what happens is the next year it has to be around the same date. paid, right? Can be a couple days earlier, later, but shouldn't be significantly different. Or you have to announce it as a company that you are later. So they had a time line to respect, and I was curious because I wanted to know, could they put the vote in there? Could they put the moving out of Delaware in there? What else was going to be there? And so that finally came only end of April. So what did we do between all that time is we asked our co-shareholders to write letters to the Delaware court, to the judge. And so some sent emails, some sent letters. She considered about 1,500 of them, 1,300 letters, and about 200 emails. Initially, she was asked by Bloomberg's Dana Hull what she's going to do with these letters. And she said, well, I don't know what to do with them. I mean, she was not interested at all. But by end of May, she actually had to include them in the court case, and they became public. So we're about 1,500, and they had to go and reach out to Broadridge, the company that helps for Tesla to understand who are Tesla's shareholders. They reached out to verify that they actually received much more, but they only included in those that became public, those where they could verify that they were shareholders. So they had a whole work of a team that had to now sit down and find out whether these people really were shareholders. And if they didn't have enough information, or if they couldn't find it, the letter was not included in the thing. So 1,500 got included. So I consider that a victory as well, because I have to say that never happened. In the whole of America's corporate history, never ever did it get a judge 1,500 letters from shareholders telling her she has to accept our participation, and she was wrong in her preliminary judgment. So that all was going on. So what happened actually on the judicial side since end of January? So when she published that, plaintiff's attorneys end of January were jubilating. I mean, the guy was, I'm not even going to say his name, I don't want to have any bad karma, was walking around all the TV channels he could, explaining that this was justice and whatever. Obviously, it was not. And then they had to, within a couple of days, bring forward their fee claims, right? That's always the way it goes. So we have this preliminary judgment. We had a couple of days later, I think it was beginning of February, their fee claims, which were so modest. I mean, they explained to us how modest it was because it was only 29,400,000 shares, which was less than 10% of what they made us gain by canceling the 300 million shares that Elon had. Well, guess what? Elon worked for his 300 million shares and we all profited from it, and you're just suckers. I'm sorry for my English. So there we are. So that was that fee claim. And then if I remember right, there is a Delaware law that then you have 120 days from there so that means about 4 months, that you have to do the hearing on these fees. So you have a couple of intermediary steps. Tesla says this is impossible. So what Amy did is, in that period of between February and now July, or maybe it's 5 months, but anyway, there was a certain maximum time until the final hearing, which finally took place 2 days ago. And on that fee aspect only. So we're now limited. We have a preliminary judgment. We have the fee discussion. And in that fee discussion, Amy did an objection, found a law team, a very, very good law team, and those lawyers wrote an objection to these exuberant fee claims. And CalPERS, even though they actually voted against the shareholder package, the shareholder vote for the compensation package, CalPERS joined Amy. So we now suddenly had Amy with CalPERS having that objection. We had Tesla explaining as well that the fees should be lower. I get to the amounts in a second. And we also have 2 Florida shareholders. They're actually attorneys, but they're attorneys specialized in helping lottery winners go about their wins, right? How to best invest that and what to do that. So they're not at all in that. So they took counsel, another lawyer that specialized in that, and representing them, doing also an objection to these exuberant fees. And they got joined last minute on Sunday by ARK Invest. So we have multiple players that all come more or less to the same conclusion on Tesla's side, saying, well, they actually deserve nothing, but if they need to be paid anything, it should be something between, let's just roughly say 10 and 50 million. Okay, so that is just the normal basis of how this, there's a couple of precedent cases, how this should be calculated. So the last thing that happened was Monday's hearing, whole day, where the judge initially let the plaintiff's attorney talk, and they explained how they really wanted 29 million shares, but if really she can't give them shares, they would also take $1.4 billion, which comes to about $75,000 the hour since they worked on it, which would be obviously the highest payout ever in US history, but and probably the world history, because nobody else is as crazy. But anyway, so that's that. And then you had Tesla's attorneys, Amy's attorneys pleading their case, and then we're just waiting now what's going to happen. In the meantime, just to make things more complicated, two other things happened. I'm sorry, it's so many layers. But
this is why we have you on.
Go through it. Yeah. So there is three other things that happened. The first one is Tesla, after the shareholder vote, because obviously the shareholder vote reconfirmed that all shareholders now, with 566 pages of proxy, including all that preliminary judgment and all the things, now suddenly know that Kimball is the brother of Elon. Yep. And we can live with that. And they're all, I don't know how she called them. But anyway, it's just so ridiculous. Anyway, so we re-voted and we got 72% approving the package again. The other good news, we got 63% of a much tougher standard approving that we move out from Delaware to Texas. So what Tesla's lawyers did is they asked for another hearing on the motion to vacate the whole case, meaning they are saying, look, you signaled a problem, we acknowledged the problem, but we cured the problem. We did another vote now with all information, so this, should cure the whole thing. Please give us the possibility to plead our cause. And she granted that. So that was a good thing. She granted that with the maximum size of motion they could file to vacate, which was 14,000 words. So they did that about 2 weeks ago, where they explained that this whole case should just be vacated. And fair enough, if there's some plaintiff's attorney's fees, if ever there is the case, but it just should be vacated. And now we're waiting for plaintiff's attorney to answer to that. I mean, I can already imagine what he's going to say. They think that in Delaware court, you cannot cure an issue while it is still pending. You have this preliminary, their reasoning will probably be, you have this preliminary judgment, we now have to get to the fees, it has to be decided, and if you have the cure, you have to come after that and do a new case and say, well, actually it was cured, and then blah, blah, blah. So they want to separate the two because obviously they want their money. So
Yes.
That's where we are.
And so they're basically trying to use a procedural machination in order to not do justice, but rather to just get paid.
Yeah, well, they won't get paid quickly anyway, because I think what Tesla is going to do in any case is whatever she awards them, she's going to put on stay, right? So that the appeal goes through and then maybe they get it afterwards. But I mean, it's such a horrendous story. I mean, the whole thing that we even have to, think about this all and get to action. So I said earlier, there are a couple of things happening. So it's the motion to vacate. There's another hearing going to be on that case. I hear, this is only rumors for the moment, that she wants to consider it on August 8th.
Oh, funny.
Exactly, isn't it? Isn't it? And I just hope that's not true. I mean, I don't know whether this is, already reliable or not, but if it is, it's just, it's incredible, but there we go. And then the other point is, so we have a couple of things in layers, right? We have the fee question and then maybe a final judgment on that. We have the motion to vacate that will be listened to maybe on 8/8. And then we have the fact that we have to actually inform Delaware that we're leaving. And that has to be done within the 4 months after the vote. So that is due by middle of October. And obviously Tesla is in no hurry to do that. And that is going to trigger another I mean, a court case is probably not the right word, but another procedure, because there is a procedure called 204, where it's just ratified and it's okay and everybody's fine. But as soon as somebody opposes it, it goes into a procedure called 205, which is then a whole new thing. And the plaintiff's attorneys from the Tonetta case is already all ready to do opposition. So that's all happening there. So you asked me earlier, and I'm sorry I'm so long about it. So what's my fame in all that? So I think my fame in all that was that I obviously helped Amy initially to set this up, and that was the Kickstarter of it all. I think I remained available during all this time, while Amy at one point, as soon as she decided that she's going to include her own persona into the opposition, had to become less of a public person. So sort of I became the figure that, you know, had this privilege. And then the third role is that once we had end of April the proxy statement and people wanted to vote, and I realized very quickly that we were missing about 400 million retail shares. It became very, very quickly obvious from the formal votes that as over the years Tesla's retail base grew, we're today 10 million retail shareholders. No other company has that, right? So while this all grew, the participation in vote actually was reduced. I did a study on that, and then I thought, oh my gosh, we need 400 million shares. And I mean, my gosh, 400 million shares when you have 3 billion outstanding, that is huge, right? That's 12-13%. And that's the 12-13% that would bring us to the 63% for Texas, and that would bring us to the 72% on the compensation package. And so when that proxy statement came out, I initially, you know, jumped into it, tried to understand that special committee, what they set up. I mean, I love this crap. I have to say, I'm feeding off it. It's crazy. So, and then people came and I was like, vote. And people came back and said, well, I can't vote. I can't vote in Norway. I can't vote with this broker in England. I can't. And it was suddenly overwhelming, and I don't know why people thought I was the right person to complain to. And so I thought, well, we did one survey monkey, may as well do a second one. So another Saturday, it always happens on a Saturday, I put out this survey saying, who can't vote, fill out, you know, where do you live, what's your bank, what's the problem, whatever. And within half a day, and that one got reposted and pinned by Elon. That was my first pinned post by Elon. I mean, not that I had much time to have the leisure of looking at it, but there I was. And so half a day later, we had already 1,500 responses. In the end, we had 4,000 people responding, which corresponded to more than 40 million shares. So I was thinking, oh my God, if we can get in 24 hours, it was 48 over the weekend. If we can get in 48 hours, 40 million shares, and we need 400 million, right? That was my goal. I mean, it just seemed so far, but I thought, my gosh, we're sitting on something. And so that Sunday, I wrote an article about, okay, here are the 15 banks that are currently having the biggest clusters of issues, you know, where there are the most shares, where there are the biggest problems, where it just doesn't seem easy to solve. And Elon picked that up again and reposted and repinned and quoted it and said, Tesla is going to reach out to all of these and we're making possible to vote. That was on the Sunday. Wow. And on the Monday, so I mean, all I did was 2 surveys, right? I mean, good job, but I mean, all it was, right? And then on Monday morning, Nordnet and Avanza in Norway, where there are lots of Tesla shares, said, okay, we'll do it. So Tesla didn't even have the time to reach out. They just felt the pressure, and that broke the dam. And then from there on, well, I can tell you one thing. So at the end of that survey, we had about 4,000 people complaining, and in the end, it was about 60 million shares, right? By the time we really closed the survey, but we had already done all the analysis and things have started moving. Now I did a new one. I'm going to publish those results next week. On the new one, we only have now 500 people that could not vote, right? So we 90% of issues we were able to address. Yeah. They're not permanent. They're not permanent solutions. There's still lots to be done, and we're working on that. But the issue that was there, we could solve it to 90%. And that brought in 420 million more shares. Can you believe it? It was just crazy. And you can actually see it in the numbers exactly how much it was. And nobody has ever been able to mobilize retail shareholders like that. The average take rate of shareholder participation is below 30%,
Right.
and ours was way above 70%, way
Yes.
above.
Yes, yes. It's just absolutely an amazing story. Now, you may or may not know I have a law degree, and so I, of course, have been watching all of this from the eyes of somebody who's seen a ton of case law, has had to, read. I can't tell you, how many books this thick that are just one case after another, in 3 years at UCLA, and it was, to me, super interesting to see what I would consider to be the worst written adjudication I've ever seen. That the judge's decision-making process, the things that how she raised her issues, the way that she came out 100% on plaintiff's side, all those things bothered me a ton. But then watching it process through, watching the whole thing go through last week, I suppose one of my most jubilant days was, and maybe I had no idea, but people were raising the question of whether or not this revote had any standing.
Yeah.
And it turned out that it had standing both in the law and in the case law.
Yes.
And that was extremely fun. I was surprised. Did you guys know? You didn't know that?
Amy did a lot of work where, she's the smartest cookie in town. I can only say that and reiterate it. And she saw very quickly that we needed a revote. And she said to me, Alexandra, I need to mobilize for a revote. Can you help me? And I said, all I have is a big mouth, because that's one thing I have, that's for sure. And I think I'm good at explaining to people who have less knowledge about it how to go about. I'm not getting into much technicals because I don't know much technicals, but I do know where I come from and where I go to, and that helps when you need to mobilize people. I agree with you, by the way, on her preliminary judgment. I was giving it a lot of thought why that preliminary judgment came when it came end of January. And this may be too much conspiracy theory for a lot of people. I want to be careful with what I say. This is just my theory, and there may be nothing to it. But this case has been going on for 6 years, and it's been lying around for 12, 15 months without much happening since 2022, right? There was not much happening if you look at motions that were inserted and whatever. If you look at all that, and there she comes then end of January, and I was wondering why end of January, right? What was that moment? And I think she's an activist judge, but I think she's actually quite smart. No woman becomes chancellor of the Chancery Court of Delaware, which is the most important chancery court in the United States, right, without being super smart. So I give it to her that she's super smart, but I also think she has an agenda. Right. So why end of January and why not earlier? Well, because she knew very well that the annual shareholder meeting had to happen in May, and that between end of January, meaning beginning of February, and middle of May, because you need to do the proxy 6 weeks prior, right? So that would have meant end of March. That gave Tesla more or less 2 months to react.
I see.
And I think she thought there was no way there was any sensible reaction happening then. The other thing I believe is there are a lot of people, and I don't have more insight. I don't know whether this is true, but there are a lot of people who think she has political ambitions. Right. Delaware has a Senate seat open for the November elections. And as a Democrat, and I think she would be a Democrat, but again, what do I know? As a Democrat, she has to submit her candidature by August 8th. Isn't that a crazy date?
Oh, look at that.
Exactly. So put yourself back into January, right? I don't want to get too much into politics, but beginning of January, when she wrote all that, or maybe she wrote a couple of weeks earlier, the Biden administration looked healthy, young and dynamic, less so now. Her career path up to that moment looked just stellar. She's known for having an activist stance, but it wasn't too critical yet. She had just won the case for Twitter
Yeah.
against Elon. So that gave her in that field, sorry, that gave her in that field some credentials.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I think at that moment, she felt very sure about herself and her future career, whether it's political or not. Now, lots of those things actually rocketed. Lots of these things are today not the same way they are anymore.
Right.
And she gets a lot of backlash in Delaware. I don't know whether you had followed that Senate hearing on another case, but which also brought obviously this whole mud up, where the former chancellor criticized her publicly. And I don't think that is typical for
Right.
chancellors to in Senate hearings to go after each other. That chancellor was a chancellor for 21 years,
Right.
and he just feels that she's playing with the state, with politics, and she's not neutral in this whole case. So anyway, all this long blabber to say, I think she felt much more confident about her preliminary judgment then. I think she felt this was clearly politically motivated, but everybody would cheer her on.
Right,
at
right,
least the
yes.
people that she felt it was important to. And I don't believe she had expected as much backlash that she got now. Now, will that change her outcome? I don't think so. I actually think she is the type who stubbornly sticks to what she has written once. I think the largest concession she's given us is that this motion to vacate is going to be heard.
Right.
And I think she will then dismiss it for whatever form error or whatever she can find, because I mean, there's always something, right? You know it as
Sure,
a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but there's always something. And that she will then march straight to the fee determination. And in some ways, there are opinions who say she may as well give them as much as they ask for, because then the appeal from Tesla will be so much stronger, right? Because it just, everything points to too much activism, to too much bias. And if she goes through with a high fee agreement, that just undermines her credibility even further. So
the place that I got a little confused, and I didn't bother to look it up, and maybe this is something you guys have talked about. We know that the next step, if there is an appeal, if we get the worst case or some bad case that still needs to be appealed, it goes to the Supreme Court of Delaware. That's the next step. Once it goes to the Supreme Court of Delaware, is there an ability to appeal it to the Supreme Court?
There is. Now, they pretend there is not, but there are very knowledgeable people that told me that there is.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And so what is their reasoning? They say that if they get this outrageous fee,
yes,
and if in the end a single shareholder of 9 shares, now 135 shares, was able to create this avalanche, I mean, don't even get me started.
Right.
But if that is all the case, then it should go to the Supreme Court, because they feel it's an abuse of a single state. All the US corporation law, that one state has now pushed the boundaries of shareholder rights so far that the federal institution has to limit it back to something more reasonable.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. All right. Well, that was been a question on my mind for quite a long time. All right. Well, this is not your first rodeo. You also got very, very involved. I think you, at least as far as I'm concerned, because I haven't been on X, for 10 years or whatever, but well, I have been, but not actively, let's say, in the community for more than, I guess, about 5 years. So the first time that I really heard about you in detail, I'd seen you a few times on X, but I hadn't heard about it in detail until you started trying to work on getting Tesla's S&P, get them on the S&P listing, as well as get their credit rating fixed, because their credit rating was really bad. And here's the obvious, if you just went through the numbers, it was like pretty obvious their credit rating should be much higher. So tell us, this would be a great time for you to let us know, just give us the professional background that put you in a position to even think about making the challenge.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Thank you, Randy. So I said earlier, I'm 58, so this is not my first rodeo, that's for sure. And I mean, I don't know why, and I'm so grateful that my husband has so much patience with me, because I mean, I just love digging into stuff that's not right. That's just, if I feel an injustice, or if I feel, it doesn't even have to be that I'm a shareholder. I have this very black and white thinking, and then I get so motivated and in overdrive. But anyway, there I am. So as my career was, I did a bachelor's degree in business administration, nice European schools, but nothing particular. And I started my career in a German bank in Paris. I'm German, but I was then already mom of a first child with a French husband, not my current husband, my first husband. And so it was logical, I could use my German, I could use my French. I mean, my French, I was still learning, but got better quickly. And France is a state, I have to say, I'm saying always lots of bad things about France, but France is a state where as a young mother you can have a professional career, while Germany at that period was just no go. And I didn't feel that with all my studies I would now sit suddenly in Germany at home and look after my child only. That was no option. So I got this job at Deutsche Bank. I was initially actually in a back office function, and then but for a couple of weeks, and they always do that to train people. And then I got into the trading room, and in the trading room, I was in charge of selling currency products to institutional investors. Loved that, love selling, love understanding this whole thing. It was lots of currency arbitrage. But by then, Europe didn't have the euro yet, so it was French francs against Deutsche Mark or against pounds or whatever. Lots of fun there. And that took about a year. They realized I was a rather smart cookie, and then they had a fund management department, and the director of that came and see me and said, we want to have you as a fund manager. I said, oh, I have no idea about fund management. He said, well, you'll learn. And I did. So I was the assistant initially, and then I became a second fund manager, and in the end I was a co-director of that department within 3 years. And then the competition hired me. So the competition was another German bank in Paris called Commerzbank, and their French part was called Caisse Centrale de Réescompte. And I became fund manager for them because they relocated their Luxembourg funds to Paris, because they realized that actually the French had a very clever system of setting up mutual funds, and they liked that. And so suddenly, from one job to the next one, I was in charge of the biggest mutual funds in Europe, just wow. Because by moving them from Luxembourg to Paris, there was a lot of know-how that was built up there. And loved that, was really great, did that for 3-4 years, had in the middle my second child, my third child. And two of those funds got rated by Moody's. That's how I met for the first time in my life the rating agencies. And Moody's team came and they audited us, and I had a whole corporate finance, blah, blah, and meetings and whatever else. And in the end, we became AAA, both of those funds. So that was obviously a nice victory. And I understood what they wanted. I mean, I spoke quite good English because I'd spent a year in North Carolina and I studied 2 years in London. So my English was good. And, French people usually are not so efficient and fluent, especially at that period, still in English. So I was their main contact, and it was my fund. So it was all good. That's how I met Moody's, and they approached me afterwards and said, we would like to hire you. We want you to do fund ratings in the whole of Europe, or continental Europe. And I said, oh, that's a great challenge. Let's do that. So I moved from the banks to the rating agency, and that was in 1997. I just had my third child then. And I'm always going with my 5 children's birthdays. Yes, yeah. You need your anchor dates, right? And so moved to Moody's 1997 to 2003. Developed their continental European fund ratings, but also then very quickly it's sort of a REIT structure of funds in Europe. There was a new product, mainly German product, loads of money there, 80 billion, 90 billion euros at that moment. And we were the only rating agency in the world who could do that. And so I did that. And then I got fired by Moody's. So that was the end of Moody's. Was something. You know what? I may as well tell the story now. But for 20 years, I've not told the story. I may as well tell it now. So that was 2003. And I had by then my 4th child in 2000 and my 5th child in 2003. And I'd negotiated with Moody's that I could work from home. So I was sitting in the south of France, And in May 2003, gave birth to my 5th child, Oscar, who is now 21. And it was the hottest summer. You can Google that. The hottest summer in France was 2003. It was crazy. And I was breastfeeding. I breastfed all my children. And 2 or 3 days later, I started working again, right? Just because I was at home, I had this child. I mean, once you're breastfeeding, that's it. And one of the journalists, because I was doing a lot of media work at that moment, called and said, oh, can we do an interview? There's this and that to come. And I said, of course we can. There wasn't the Zoom times yet. It was all on the telephone. And the child was crying. So obviously, what did I do? I breastfed the child. And so I was talking to him on the phone. He had no idea about anything until my son started to scream again, right? And he said, oh, you were actually with the baby. And I said, yeah, he's a couple of days old. I was just breastfeeding. I'm sorry, blah, and whatever. And this idiot, I'm sorry, I probably should be grateful, put it in the newspaper. SVP from Moody's is breastfeeding while giving an interview. That was the title. And that's what I got fired for. I am not joking.
That is what they fired you for. It's because you allowed that information to go out into the press.
Exactly. I know. I mean, probably was my mistake, but there we are. So anyway, so that was something. But then there's always a silver lining. You know, that's one thing I learned about my big mouth. So I did that. And my clients, you know, I told you earlier about these open-ended real estate funds. Yes. So this whole market was me, right? I was rating them. They did a lot of education with me, so I understood what I was rating, and I did all that. And they were completely flabbergasted that somebody would fire me for breastfeeding a child while I was talking to a journalist, because that's what it was. And it's true. I tell you, it's true in 2003. Anyway, I
now have my thumbnail in mind.
I'm sorry. There you go. For 4 years, I was going to say, I'm never telling this story. I'm never telling. Here I am. Anyway, I'm happy I told it. So this industry contacted me and said, you know what? We don't care about Moody's, but we want you to continue doing these ratings. So what did I do? With a small rating agency that already existed in Germany, we set up a second structure that was 50% mine and 50% theirs. Oh. And we continued rating them. So I had my own rating agencies for 4 years, from 2003 to 2007, until I sold my parts. And that was it. That was enough. In 2007, I couldn't anymore. And I had my 5 children. And you know, I was flying a lot to Germany. I was on the road too much, and it was just it. So in 2007, I quit the financial markets. I've had it with rating agencies. And I said to my family, I'm going to stay at home now and be a stay-at-home mom. Oh. That lasted about 2 months. I don't even think it lasted 2 months. But anyway, I remember very vividly this moment where the 5 kids, so the oldest one had the baby in his arms, and they came all 5, and they said, Mom, please, can you please go back to work? That's the bad mother I am. You see, Michel is a great father, but they just thought that's it. Because, I mean, I was obviously on their back. Now I was suddenly looking after homework, of the rooms to be clean. They just thought that was no fun. Anyway, so I thought, what am I going to do as a job? Because one thing I was sure, you know, at that moment, it was more than 20 years in finance, that I didn't want to do that anymore. It was more than, wait, when did I start? 1990. Well, 17 years in finance. So I was sure I didn't want to go into finance. There was also this whole asset-backed security issue brewing up, because I was a lot linked to that. I wasn't in the asset-backed structure, but we both Michel and me, we told them all the time, this is going to explode. This is going to explode. And so I really felt like, no more rating agency. And so every summer, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm telling you my whole life, but there we go. Every summer we would we would bring all the kids to California. Michel, his partner in the vineyard, had a house at that moment here, so we would spend our summers here in California, close to Paso Robles. And in 2007, the US suddenly decided that they needed biometric passports for everybody to get in. Oh. And I had no means of getting biometric passports for all the kids and us in the short lapse of time that we were supposed to leave, especially since I always needed the agreement from the father of the oldest 3, my first husband, and he was, I mean, any story that could become complicated, he was there. So there we were, and couldn't travel to California. And so what would we do? And where we lived in the south of France, we lived in a good house, a nice house, but we had bought the neighboring property because the old lady who lived there had died, and we just didn't want neighbors. So we had this hardly renovated old house in the south of France. And that became crucial because every summer I rented out our villa because it paid so much money to do that. While we were going to California, there were guests in our house using it, and now these guests were supposed to come, and I had my 5 kids, and what were we going to do? So we moved into that half ruin for that summer, and we had the best summer ever. It was probably the poorest but the most fun summer we had for a long time, and we became, because it's a neighboring property, we became very quickly friends with those guests that were in our main house, and they said to us, "Well, you should have been your own agency, because the lady that was the agency for them bringing there was doing nothing and got 25 or 30% of that money." And I said, "That's actually a good idea. I'm looking for a new job. How about I rent out my own villa?" And went to my accountant, very clever French man, Vietnamese origins. And he said, "Alexandra, that's no problem at all. You have to become a real estate agent for that." I said, "Why do I have to become a real estate agent?" He said, "Well, because in France, you need to be a real estate agent to be a vacation home organizer, whatever." And I said, "Okay, is that difficult?" He said, "No, I do all the paperwork." So he did all the paperwork, and 6 weeks later, I suddenly got a license as a realtor. And I had no idea about selling properties, buying properties. All I knew is that I wanted to rent out my house, right? But then my story started because I started with my house. 4 months later, I had 40. All my friends said, "Oh,
my gosh."
Exactly. By next summer, I had 150. So now I was property manager for vacation rentals for 150 property. But that's me. You know, I have a lot of good sides, but I'm also just plain crazy, right? That's it. So that was 2008. So that came together with the crisis of real estate, right? But those high-end vacation rentals, they still worked for quite a while because Europe was sort of delayed compared to the United States.
Right.
So anyway, 2008, I did that. 2009, guests came back in one of the 150 villas and said, "We want to buy this villa." So that was my first transaction in 2009. And by 2013, I had done about 250 sales.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved finding homes. I had my own way of doing this. I absolutely loved it. So I was my own agency owner. I had a couple of agents then helping me, but it was absolutely crazy. We continued the rental business, and in a moment where lots of others sclerosed because of the crisis, I was a newcomer. You know, I had nothing to lose. I only had to gain, and I did it. So that was 2014. I'm sorry, I'm just pulling it all out to you.
No, this is what we wanted to do. It's good.
It's crazy, right? And then in 2013, so let me tell you that. So I met Michel, my husband, in 1998 because he was sent from Moody's headquarters in New York to Paris to work with this wonderful fund rater on a product that was called a fund analyzer, which is a statistical model, because he's a PhD in statistics from Berkeley, done a lot of option models and stuff, and he was working on a fund analyzing model. And so he walked in my office in 1998. I was married. I had just had my 3rd child, just changed of jobs, and sat down and said, "You want to marry me?" And I thought, no, right? I remember I told you this one already, so I'm not going to get into that. So that was 1998. So at that moment when, you know, the whole private lives had to be rearranged, I mean, it wasn't easy. And I, you know, it wasn't easy for my ex-husband. It wasn't easy for his ex-wife. It was just a mess. But anyway, there we were. And then we made child number 4 and child number 5, and we moved from Paris to the south of France. But anyway, by 2013, so he's French. Michel is born in Alsace, but after he did his undergrad and grad in France, he went to Berkeley, and then he always lived in the United States, right? He was green card holder, and he was, you know, happy in the United States until he met this crazy lady. And so I said to him, "Well, this is all fine. We can be in couple, but I'm not moving to the United States. I've got kids. I've got them in school. My ex-husband, he wants to see the kids." I mean, everything was just complicated. Anyway, so he moved to France. He moved back to France for me in 1998. And in 2013, he had it. He was looking at France every day. And I mean, people who know Tesla Boomer Papa knows where he's politically. And I mean, he just hated it. He just hated it every day. And I was always telling him, this is your country. I'm the guest here. I'm German, right?
And so he moved to California.
Exactly. Well, wait for it. And so he was telling me exactly. I'm so glad you understand the mess, Randy. Thank you so much. So, because I have it every day. So in 2013, he tells me, this summer we're going to do a round trip. We've sold a house in California by then because we didn't go there. With my agency, I couldn't go 6 weeks on vacation anymore and all that. So we sold the house that we had in California. And he said, we should go back to California and do a round trip. And I was naively, stupidly saying yes.
Oh.
And so we landed in San Francisco. He had booked the nicest hotels with the kids with us and drove down to Santa Barbara. And there he was. I remember as if it was today. It was on the harbor and said, look, we could move here to Santa Barbara. I have so good memories when I was living in California and how I came down to Santa Barbara. And he obviously didn't have it all taken into account how California has shifted, right? Because he remembered the Santa Barbara from the 70s and 80s. He had no clue. So anyway, I was looking at him and said, no. And we did the Grand Canyon and whatever. And we came back to Santa Barbara 2 or 3 weeks later. It was just a beautiful trip. Kids were happy. Everybody was happy. And back on the harbor, I don't know why it was on the harbor. And he goes, you really don't want to move here. And I hear myself saying, my brain goes, no. My mouth goes, yeah, I think we should. And I was like, what did you just say? It was like something was happening there. And I thought, oh my God. And then I reasoned myself. I said, look, this man was for 15 years in France because you wanted to be in France. Well, how about now you do a couple of years in the United States for him? So then we had to look after a visa and got my E2 visa, set up my firm. So that was 2014. Well, 2013, the vacation. And then in 2014, in May 2014, I went to the US Embassy in Paris and got a 5-year E2 visa to set up my consulting firm, helping other entrepreneurs immigrate to the United States. So that was from the beginning the point. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. So my main job is to help Europeans, but also Bangladeshi, South African, South American, wherever they come from, lots of Canadians, entrepreneurs set up their businesses, either for a non-immigrant E2 visa, that's what I had initially, or for a green card, that's called NIW, National Interest Waiver. And we set up their businesses. We consult them what they should do, where we see niches, how they should, go about financing it. The whole setup, that's us.
I see. Okay. And how do you rate that job? You've had, you're like me, you've had many professions. How do you rate your current job compared to selling real estate, doing finance, all these things that you've done?
Actually, the most fun was certainly the real estate part.
Real estate, yeah.
I mean, first of all, I love the money of it because in the south of France, obviously the houses are very expensive. So and in France, you get 6% as an agent, right? Okay. So this is like really good money, and I love good money. But I just love also this feeling of understanding your client, what their needs are, what their style is, finding the right house, understanding the demographics. In France, it's not at all as transparent a market as it is here in the US. Here you go on Zillow and you've got all this information. In France, there's nothing. So lots of my international clients appreciated that I understood what they were looking for in terms of, numbers and understanding the market and whatever, getting it at the right price. And then I love negotiating. I mean, negotiating is really my big thing. So it reunited my commercial side, my negotiating side. It gave me this family feeling that I helped other families find the right place. I loved that. So, and I asked myself a lot of times, should I have done that in the US? Should I have become a realtor again? But I think in the US, it just functions so much differently. First of all, the market is much more transparent. And then I think it's a lot based on relationship. I think people have their realtor. And you can't just enter a market as frivolously as I did in France, where I just set up a rental agency and then it just ballooned, right? So that was certainly my most fun job. But I actually don't analyze it in a way of, which one is better or was it logical? My career is in no way logical, but I'm just a real opportunistic person, right? In every job, I try to make the most of it for my employer, but also for me. And then once I became self-employed, there was no going back. I mean, I could not integrate into any corporate structure anymore. That's actually a fun thing because people always go, oh, Elon should hire you. My gosh, I would die in a corporate structure. Not only Tesla, I can't anymore. I need the space that you have as an entrepreneur, right?
Of course.
And what I currently do is really beneficial. I've helped about 400 families settle here on E2 visas and about 200 families get their green card. So this is enormous what we're doing. Our success rate is 99%. Nobody in the whole of the United States has a success rate that's even comparable for these cases. And I've got a really great team. We're all women, hardworking women, all moms. Everybody works from home. Everybody has their own, setup. I know, which days certain women are less available, or at 4 o'clock somebody has to get their kids from school, whatever. I respect all that, but in exchange, I get so much from my employees, so much dedication and hard work. So I really feel we've set up that's very unique. And I enjoy what I'm doing, and it gives me a lot of time now because our teams are really working so well that I can spend on Tesla, which is my absolute passion, right? So I can't say one is better than the other. It's really, it always fell in place. I always knew how to make money out of it. It's important for me to make money. That there's something mercantile. My parents were merchants, and I always feel like I want to make sure I cater to my needs, to my children's needs. And so it always fell in place. I can't say anything is bad ever. It always worked out, even if there were stressful moments, I grant you that. I mean, being fired for breastfeeding, I think there are not many people that can tell you that.
So, all right. So you mentioned your passion for Tesla. So almost everybody is interested. They always want to know, Randy, what was your moment? When did you first learn about Tesla? When did you first start getting interested? You certainly must have a lot of passion to write 2 books and start a show. So tell us, what was your moment? What happened? How did it start?
So 2014, we came to the US and we needed 2 cars. And we bought a Mercedes because we always had Mercedes for a long time we had Mercedes in Europe. And then Michelle wanted an electric car. We already wanted an electric car in France, but we couldn't get our hands on it. There were so few of them. And it was, small utilitarian cars. It wasn't anything crazy. And so we had the big Mercedes. We needed something smaller. And so we needed to set up a credit history. Anybody that immigrated to the United States knows that initially you have to do lots of crazy stuff, like do leasing when actually you would prefer to buy, right? But you need to get into this whole credit system. So we didn't want to lease the Mercedes because we just bought that straight out, but I wanted to have a leasing. And BMW, for their i3, that little car that was so cute, did leasings at a unbelievably low rates because they needed to get them in the market. It was their compliance car, right? Remember, California had that law that you needed to have 1 EV in order to sell here in California. So anyway, so we got that i3, and it was the cutest little car. And we straight away fell in love with it, but it was like 60 miles of range. I mean, it was ridiculous, but it was perfect to go to town and do a couple of things. And it was just good, and was less bulky than the Mercedes and whatever. So we had that. And then when that came, so that was 2014. When that lease expired in 2017, I had a reservation in for a Model 3. So I had my eyes on Tesla, but I couldn't get my hands on an M3. So because they were production hell, and I had my lease expiring, I needed to give it back. And obviously BMW wanted to tie me into a second new car, but the range was still, I mean, you could have some with a range extender, but it was nothing, 100 miles or whatever. And so we said, you know what, we can't get a Tesla. We don't want to have another BMW. How about we take the Bolt? So we had a Bolt from 2017 to 2020. Now the Bolt came to maturity in May 2020, which was the beginning of COVID. So the beginning of COVID was actually in March. And 2 months before the expiry of the lease, I said, we need to do something. This time I want a Tesla. And Michelle said, well, let's go for a drive. He actually had gone a couple of days earlier already to do a test drive on a Tesla. And he said, we're going for a test drive. And went there. He let me drive, which was obviously the intelligent thing to do. Remember, he brought me to that harbor in Santa Barbara twice. Yes. Always think twice when he does things, always. So let me drive. I drove twice around the block, and that was it. So because I moved from normal electric cars. I didn't move from ICE to Tesla, which
Yeah.
obviously would have been a bigger jump. But I think I was so convinced because I had seen now 6 years of EVs,
Yes.
and now I had suddenly this computer on wheels.
Yeah.
You know, it's like an old landline telephone, and now suddenly you have a smartphone, right? And I was like, this is it. I mean, not only do I love the look of the car, not only do I love how it drives, but there's so much technology in it. It's convincing. So I remember very well, it was a Tuesday afternoon, came back from that test drive, and I said to Michelle, not only are we taking the car, we're selling everything and we're going into Tesla, which we did on that Wednesday morning. And I'd done no research, Randy. And so here you have this fund manager, diversification, this rating analyst, diversification, right? For 20 years, diversification. And I mean, everybody knows already I'm crazy with my 5 kids and everything, but I mean, to take that decision at the moment, you know, you're in the US, you just build up, you don't have a green card yet. You know, I had the green card, sorry, but I mean, I was still not sure I would, you know, live the rest of my life in the United States. Now I am because I'm a citizen, but there was still stuff moving, but there was no doubt in my mind that this was the investment. And so Michelle looked at me and said, "You're sure?" I said, "There's no doubt." And so Wednesday morning we sold everything else and we went all in Tesla. And since then, every money we have goes into Tesla. And so I have now thousands of shares and I love it. And I've bought a tiny position of ASTS, which is a satellite telephone company, just a little thing that I think it's now 6x from what I bought it. So I'm very happy with that, but it's a tiny amount. So it's 98%.
Yeah.
Tesla and 2% ASTS because it grew so much.
Yeah.
But other than that, I didn't have any NVIDIA. I didn't go into anything else. And then obviously we did it. And then came, I mean, you know me by now. The next day was like, okay, so what did you do? Now, how about you do some research? And that's where it started. And that's where the S&P inclusion started. And I said, okay, they're late. They're you know, barraging as long as they can. So we needed to do something there. And then I looked into the ratings and I realized what shenanigans was there because I very quickly became clear. So I started name shaming them and, you know, got the support from the community to move those. So we got investment grade there. And then ESG, and then, you know, it's just one after the other.
So, all right. So now I high on my list of what I wanted to find out today is, would your classmates or your young children have thought that you would eventually become such a rabble rouser? Were you doing these kinds of things when you were 12 and 17 and 22, or were you just really building a career and building a family?
I'm the oldest of 3.
Okay.
And my brother is just a year younger. My brother is by far better in academics. He's a lawyer in Germany. It's actually very close to Volkswagen, Audi, and BMW. So that's another painful situation, but that's another story. I always was more of the street smart person. I'm not saying that I'm bad in academics, but it wasn't, you know, I wasn't going to do 7 years of studies. I wasn't doing the best high school degree. That's all my brother. And but one thing I'm probably good at is when I see an opportunity, and it could be an opportunity because it's unjust, or it could be an opportunity because it's so clear and that it is an opportunity. But when I see something that's not right, or that is particularly comforting or whatever, I jump on it. I just do it. And I think that's why I ended up with 5 children. I actually wanted 6 and I was pregnant 6 times, but I lost one baby, the first one. But as a very young person, I already said to my mother, I want 6 children. I mean, who says that these days, right? And so it was, you know, there is some go-getter in there, no doubt, which brings a lot of trouble. You know, I mean, honestly, I say so often, my husband, I mean, not sure you want to be married to a crazy one like me, right? Because there's always noise. There's always something, right? And some noise comes with good stuff and some noise comes with trouble, right? And that's me. So
I think you should run for mayor of Santa Barbara, or maybe city council person for Santa Barbara. Maybe you could start to turn the state. You know, you could be the first one to go back to red.
You are so crazy because you understand me. You know, I became a citizen last Tuesday, July
I
2nd.
know, I know.
And we were driving back from San Fernando Valley, where in Chatsworth there is the USCIS office. And we were like 15 minutes in the car. And I said to Michelle, maybe I should run for office. And he was like, and you know, any normal person would just say, how about you just slow down? And he said, I think that's a good idea. And I was like, maybe I should run for office. See, that's me. That's me. And I have no clue what I want to do, but
Yeah.
I think I should run for office because this country, this land has given me so much the last 10 years. I love America like nothing else. And I think I want to give back, right? And
Okay.
so if that comes with running for office, well, maybe I'll run for office.
Wow. Well, I'll support you 100%. Yeah, you mentioned your 5 kids. So long before you knew about Elon Musk, you already believed that we have to keep the world popular.
Oh, yeah. I did my part. I did.
You did your part. So how about your kids? Are they multiplying at the rate that they should?
Nothing. No grandkids.
You have no grandkids
I
yet.
have no grandkids. I mean, they're between 33 and 21. So I had 5 under 12. And I mean, first of all, I think they felt like they always had enough kids around. So there's nobody who is like, oh, I want kids, right? They're just nobody. And then I think this generation is so spoiled, even with a crazy mother like me, that you know, one has 2 dogs, the other has a cat, the other is studying. So my big hope is for my number 3, Theo. He just got married, and I think those are probably the closest to a decision. He's 27. And so the last 2 months, just to give you an insight, the last 2 months, so much happened. There was Theo's marriage to Noelle. That was beginning of May. So went to Pennsylvania, beautiful marriage, had really good time. Then we came back to Santa Barbara. So that was just when the proxy statement was announced, right? I'm always thinking in Tesla terms now. So we had the proxy statement, we had the marriage of my son, then we had this get the vote out thing. Then I went back for the first time in 5 years to Europe because with COVID we couldn't travel a lot, right? So so we went for 2 weeks to Europe. That was the height of the get out to vote movement. So I was spending half my time in Europe trying to organize votes, but that's okay. I don't complain. And then we came back from Europe, and then the shareholder vote, beginning of June. So this was still, you know, in 2-week rhythms, everything was happening, which was obviously a glorious day. We won, it's all good. And then I came back, and then I had to prepare for the citizenship interview on July 2nd. So all this was 8 weeks. Crazy.
Wow. All right. So now the other question on my mind, because, you know, I've had my moments of small fame in my life. I've written 13 books, and I've had some fame in the bicycle industry, and I had some fame because I got rid of the diamond lane on the Santa Monica freeway. I've had my little moments of, you know, going out there and being a rebellious person and getting my picture in the paper. I never wanted any fame at all. Don't have any interest in fame. I have lots of interest in money. I have no interest in fame.
Be my guest. That's it.
So here's my question, though. Now that you're a public facing person, and apparently you don't mind it because you're going to maybe go on and run for office, but there's a lot of downside to being a public facing person. So what has that been like for you to see the kind of sad side of the
it doesn't happen a lot. The most current thing was that a couple of days ago I got a letter in my personal mailbox at home. So that really shocked me because I felt like, oh, that's like an intrusion in my life. You know, it's one thing that I share so much on social media. It's another one that somebody would actually use that information, find out more about me, and write me a letter. And then probably the letter was about how Tesla could improve their business model. So, I mean, what do you think that I can do? I can do nothing. And people always imagine just because now Elon follows me that I have a direct line. I don't have a direct line. I've never had a DM from Elon, and that's just fine like it is. So no. And so that's a little bit the uncomfortable thing, right? Or you go on an airport for your personal travel and you land in a whatever little airport and somebody comes out and said, oh, Tesla boomer mama. And you're like, yes, yes, that's me. So it's sort of, you know, when the persona overspills a bit, I mean, I'm not complaining because I get so much love from my followers, right? I get so much appreciation that this is tiny stuff. And just for that little story, because in the meantime, I found out that the letter was written by a gentleman in Virginia, Mr. Brown, And he's an 86-year-old gentleman who was a teacher in his life. And so he probably saw me on one of those YouTube channels and thought, she'll know, or she will find a way, or I don't know what, and probably meant well, right? I mean, it scared me, freaked me out, but probably there's nothing, no bad intention behind it. So compared to the love I get and the appreciation I get, it's minimal. I mean, you should have seen that. Were you at the shareholder day on June 13th in Austin?
No, I have not yet gone to any of the events. I'm looking very hard at Oxnard at the end of the month. I am looking very hard at going down for the 8-8.
Yeah.
If I can find a way to get
It's not Oxnard, it's San Luis Obispo.
I'm sorry, San Luis Obispo. Yep. I'm sorry, San Luis Obispo. Looking hard at possibly going up for that. Looking hard at maybe going down for the 8-8 event if I can find a +1 somewhere, or get invited. It's either one of those would be good. And I'm even thinking about going down to see the Starship this time. So yeah, I've got 3 in a row. Boom, boom, boom.
There's always something, right?
Yes, but I have. These would be my first forays into the.
I see. Well, you should come to San Luis Obispo. I'll be there. I'll speak. The Disciples will be there. It's fun. I was there last year. I mean, it's not like a typical Tesla event because it's open air. It's more of a family event, but it's really nice. And I love Central California, so it's really nice.
Yeah, my son.
Now, to get back to the shareholder meeting, I mean, the love I got there, people wanting to take selfies, coming and thank me. I mean, all I did was a couple of surveys and try to get the people motivated, right? I don't feel I did as much to deserve so much recognition, right? So it's mind-boggling. You're just sitting there and you think, my gosh, all these people are so grateful and tell me their personal stories, tell me how this investment in Tesla is important for them, how they want to hold forever, how they making lots of sacrifices to be able to continue purchasing shares. And they share that with me, and I feel so responsible for them. I want to make sure that this gets done. So this is beautiful. This is really, I'm getting much more than I'm actually feeling bad about it. I'm getting so much out of this.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. So anything else on your vision? Do you see any other places where you think you're going to insert yourself?
I have no idea. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I just came up with this stupid idea, should I run for office? The other thing I was also thinking, and you know how this works, I could do 3 years of evening classes to actually get a law degree, right? I don't have a law degree. I only have my bachelor's degree. And then I'm telling myself, no, I don't want to become a lawyer. That's the last thing, because I'm too much for a lawyer, right? I mean, nobody needs a lawyer like me. I think I'm good at what I do, but certainly not at being a lawyer. So I'm sort of, but I mean, I'm quite pleased of myself, at 58, successful entrepreneur, very happy wife, most happy possible mother, that I still have this drive to do other things, and I'm still looking for things to do.
Sure, you could become a YouTuber. I mean, heck, what the heck, how hard can it be? I did it.
I have a channel with 10,000 people, but I don't really do much on YouTube, I have to say.
No, yeah, it's a lot of work.
It is,
and it doesn't pay well. I mean, it could.
Well, it pays better than X, doesn't it? Because X is a lot of work too, and
X is a crazy. I just decided a couple of weeks ago to see if I could get to my 5 million, in 90 days. That's 55,000 impressions a day.
I know, it's a lot of
work, unless you get lucky, unless you get a couple of things that go crazy, which help you on the way. But I mean, holy mackerel!
It's really difficult, and I mean, there are so many people on X that once you have a certain number of followers, it gets easier.
Yeah.
And then there are strategies to it. I actually publish every 2 weeks my revenues and how they got there, meaning all the key numbers. I still haven't figured out what their formula is, where it is, but I understand more and more that engagement is actually more important than number of views.
Yes.
And once you understand that, I think the quality of your posts improves, because what you want is create this engagement.
Sure.
And I think it's a lot of fun. I really love being on X. I'm actually addicted to it. When I don't go for a day or two, I feel like something's really missing in my life. But compared to other platforms, who are now paying less. But I mean, what YouTube paid in the good old days, not when I was there yet, but for some of the creators, that's obviously not comparable at all to the X revenues.
Right. So then, of course, my favorite thing in the entire world, in the Tesla world, is now Optimus. I have been the optimist since the beginning. I wrote about Optimus in the Elon Musk Mission. What was that? 19 months ago, we published.
Wow.
And we were already talking about Optimus. We had at least one chapter devoted to Optimus in the Elon Musk Mission. You know, Elon describes it as being bigger than all the rest of everything combined. How do you feel about Optimus? We just heard this morning, or middle of the night last night, Elon says, hey, Gen 3 or the final version is going to be finished before the end of the year. What are you thinking about Optimus in terms of the whole future of Tesla?
I mean, it's going to be amazing. And I also feel Tesla is a little bit the same mess than I am in my personal life or professional life, meaning you start with, and obviously Elon probably thought this through much more than I can ever think this through, but you start with a car, you get from the car to full self-drive, you get from full self-drive to the Optimus, right? Because now you have, and I mean, neural nets were no thing 10 years ago, right? Nothing could tell you that by going for full self-drive, you would get to a human bot.
Right.
But yet here it falls in place, right? And that's what I always think, the brave and courageous things fall in place. If you do the right thing, something good will come out of it. And I think Optimus is obviously the best that can come out of it, because the labor market is just so enormous. People want to work less and less. I mean, the whole Western civilization is already subcontracting physical work to Asia and other zones of the world. So the fact that there is now a physical worker that can interact with us, that can see, that can move in space, that can do things, is just such a revolution. And I do actually believe it's also the end of lots of pain that we have. When I hear the All In podcast and all these people wonder how we will ever get out of debt, the Optimus is actually one of the means to get economies out of debt and get them back to track. I compare this, and this may be strange to you, but again, with my life, there are over 5 things happening at the same time. I'm currently losing weight. I'm losing weight thanks to what is called a GLP-1 medicine, you know, these shots, Ozempic and whatever, but people heard about it. So people are like, oh my God, how can you do all that? This is all cheating, or I don't know what. Well, it's not, because this is actually a natural medicine in there. It's peptides that have been developed for over 20 years. And they realize that our abused bodies by too much American diet or too little exercise or whatever is missing these peptides. And by injecting these peptides, your body goes back to a natural state of functioning. And that's why you lose weight and why you have less hunger and whatever. So why am I saying all that? Because the discovery of these peptides and these GLP-1 agonists is the same way of, for me, it's comparable to where we are getting with the economy with the bot, meaning we're having a situation that has drifted so much into a state of desperation that finally there is a cure. And in the same way, our economy being in such a state of desperation of, you know, spending too much money, having too much deficit, not producing enough, not having enough manufacturing, well, there's the bot. So I mean, it's the same type of miracle that a solution finally comes up that solves much of the problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and of course, we spend a huge amount of time on this channel talking about productivity. It's my little hobby horse, is that, you know, it's all about the productivity. And what a lot of people don't also add into that conversation is that you have to have the population. You know, Elon talks about the population all the time. I've been talking about demographics for 50 years. You can predict the future. It's one of the easiest ways to predict the future is to look at the demographic trend, because those people will be 5 years older in 5 years. It's just just going to happen every single time. And so you combine that with the questions about productivity. Well, if you're not if you're not creating enough labor to produce the products in the future, well, then your economy, let's see, Japan, you know, comes to mind. Your future is gone. You don't have
down. It is exactly. And we actually have the problem already. I think there are about 2 million jobs in the US that nobody can ever fill.
Right. Yep. So Well, okay, let's see. I'm going to give you the last word. Is there
Oh, thank you very
anything,
much. Well, thank you for having me,
is there any
Randy.
passion? Is there anything you're passionate about in, especially with regard to Tesla or Elon or anything that we haven't talked about that's a particular passion right now that we haven't covered?
Well, not particularly about Elon, but one thing I really want to do is give a big call out to May Musk. I think this woman is wonderful, and she's really helping and supporting our community as well. So for these last 2 months, not that I didn't have enough to do, but I re-listened to her audiobook. A Woman Makes a Plan, A Woman Has a Plan, I think it is. And I have it in print form, but I also have it now in audio. And I just think there's so much wisdom in this woman, and
Wow.
this shines through Elon, shines through Kimball and Tosca, and obviously the grandchildren. And the way she mastered her own life and she mastered the education of her children should really inspire lots of us and lots of people that may be stuck in a certain moment of their life. And I think it's actually a book that's not only written for women. I think men should listen to it as well, because there's lots of good life advice in there. And so if I can give one advice to anybody is get that audiobook or get that book. It's really nicely written and a good read.
Wow, that's extremely interesting as a close to our time together. Well, well, I want to thank you, I think the entire community hopefully will enjoy hearing a little bit more of the backstory, because at the end of the day, the money doesn't really matter. The big houses don't matter. The beautiful
That's right.
cars don't matter. What really matters is, knowing about each other, knowing our stories, being able to be understood a little bit more and to understand a little bit more. So again, Alexandra, thank you for doing this today, and maybe we'll see you in Oxnard. No, no, I
It's in
said it again.
Louis
It's
Obispo,
San
but
Luis
I hope you
Obispo. I don't
do.
know
I
what's
hope
wrong
you
with
do
me.
come.
You
Okay,
just have to
Randy.
keep going, Randy, past Oxnard.
Exactly. There's still 2 hours after that, but that's okay.
All right,
Thanks a lot,
thank you.
Randy.
All right, thank you so much. And to all of you out there, as always, it's been great talking to you.